Hello, everyone. This is recording number 10 for a class on early Greek philosophy. We turn to early Greek atomism, and specifically, I want to introduce an idea that is quite striking that there are infinitely many, or in another translation, innumerable worlds. The protagonists here are Leucippus and Democritus. And, here are the outlines of the proposal. The first step is a distinction between atoms and void. And in making that distinction, the atomists seem to engage with Parmenidean ideas. They say that the atoms are no more than the void, and the void is no less than the atoms. So they seem to use this Parmenidean notion of being or something like it. And they seem to say that atoms and void are. Now, next step. What are atoms? The atoms are unbreakable, ungenerated. There are infinitely many of them. The void is also infinite. The atoms move through the void. The atoms have different sizes and shapes. Given their movement through the void, they collide with each other, and thereby they form compounds. They sort of hit each other and interlock. Now, these compounds have tiny bits of void in them, as it were, because of the different sizes and shapes of the atoms. So this is why the compounds can also again fall apart and will also again fall apart. Compounds are generated and they will again be destroyed. Now, these compounds are, stones and people and trees, but also the world. And the atomists have a quite complex proposal for how this kind of world formation in the void works. But because they think that the void is infinite, they argue it just can't be the case that this world formation happens only once. It must happen, in fact, innumerable times. So there are infinitely many worlds, and some of them, they think or propose, are populated with living beings like our world. So that quite intriguing proposal seems to be reached by highly abstract arguments about atoms and voids, starting from a kind of engagement with seemingly something like a kind of Parmenidean conversation. Now, I want to end the recording by just asking a question about the classification of that kind of picture of the world. In introductions to early Greek philosophy, you may sometimes find the idea that atomists are materialists, and sometimes even the kind of conflation of the notion of atoms and matter, as if atoms were well described as matter. Now, why would that come up in introductions? Aristotle charges the atomists with kind of only recognizing what he calls the material cause. And he blames them for not acknowledging the other three causes that are important to his philosophy: the efficient cause, the final cause, and the formal cause. Now, we already know that Aristotle discusses earlier philosophers in terms of his own philosophical project and in his own terminology. So, he talks about the atomists in terms of material causation, but that just need not be the way in which we then interpret it. And I just want to mention that in my earlier recordings for my Intro to Ancient Philosophy, there are two that speak to those kinds of matters. Number 42 talks about the ways in which atomism seems to engage with Parmenidean philosophy, and number 21.1 is about Aristotle's arguments against atomism.